In the stillness of a desert night, an old cowboy named Jed sat alone by a flickering campfire, the flames casting erratic shadows across his weather-beaten face. His eyes, sharp despite the years etched deep into his skin, traced the scattered gold nuggets he counted slowly in his palm. Each nugget glinted faintly under the moonlight, a quiet testament to secrets kept and fortunes found. Yet Jed's solitude was not born of loneliness alone. It was a shield forged by years of harsh lessons and guarded trust. The campfire crackled softly, the only sound breaking the vast silence of the surrounding hills. The air smelled of dry sage and wood smoke, mingling with the faint scent of damp earth from a recent rain. Jed's fingers brushed one nugget after another, his mind wandering back to a time when these treasures were more than mere metal. They were keys to survival, to hope, and to a future he had never dared to dream of. Several years earlier, the landscape bore the same rugged beauty, but held a different kind of tension. A poor boy named Tommy wandered through the unforgiving terrain, his clothes ragged and stained, his face gaunt from hunger and hardship. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the dusty trail into a shimmering ribbon of heat that blurred the horizon. Yet Tommy's steps were sure, driven by a desperate hope that somewhere beyond the hills lay salvation. Tommy's arrival at Jed's remote ranch was anything but heralded. The old cowboy, despite his gruff exterior and solitary existence, noticed the boy before anyone else did. Tommy's shadow passed near the creek that ran beside Jed's land, his thin frame casting a fleeting silhouette against the rocks. Jed watched silently from the porch of his weathered cabin, curiosity piqued by the boy's determination and the quiet desperation that clung to him like dust. At first, Jed said nothing. He was a man accustomed to keeping secrets close, especially those that could change a life as much as the knowledge he guarded. The hills around his ranch held more than just scrub and stone. They concealed veins of gold, hidden beneath layers of earth and time. Jed had discovered them years ago, a secret that had granted him a modest fortune, and more importantly, a measure of peace, in a world that often dealt harshly with the weak. But when Tommy appeared one evening, trembling from hunger and exhaustion, Jed's hardened facade softened. The boy's eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and hope, met his own. "I'm hungry," Tommy said simply, voice barely above a whisper. There was no shame in the admission, only a raw plea for help. Jed reached into a worn leather satchel and pulled out a few hardtack biscuits and a tin of water. "Eat," he commanded softly, his tone devoid of the usual gruffness he reserved for strangers. Tommy accepted the food with shaky hands, the relief evident in the way his shoulders relaxed just a fraction. The old cowboy sat back in his creaking chair, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. "You know why you're wandering out here, boy?" Jed asked after a long silence. Tommy nodded, swallowing the last bite. "I'm looking for a way out, somewhere to make a life." Jed's gaze grew distant, memories flickering like the firelight. "This land's cruel to those without a secret, but I've got one, a way to find gold in these hills. It's kept me alive these years." He paused, the weight of his words settling between them. "And I'm thinking you might be the kind who needs to learn it." The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. "You'd teach me? But why? You don't know me." Jed's laugh was a low rumble, dry as the earth beneath their feet. "Maybe I do, or maybe I'm just tired of keeping it all to myself." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But it ain't easy. The hills don't give up their treasures to just anyone. You gotta have the grit to keep looking, even when there's nothing but rock and dirt." Tommy's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. The promise of gold was a light in the darkness of his life, but the path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenge. Still, something in Jed's steady gaze told him this old man's offer was genuine. A chance not just at wealth, but at belonging. Days turned into weeks as Tommy stayed at the ranch, learning the rhythms of the land under Jed's watchful eye. The old cowboy's teachings were harsh and unyielding, a reflection of the wilderness itself. Tommy learned to read the subtle signs in the soil, the glint of mineral flecks beneath the creek bed, and the patterns of erosion that hinted at what lay hidden underground. Each lesson was a test of patience and resolve, the kind that shaped a boy into a man. Jed rarely spoke of his past, but in quiet moments by the fire, he shared fragments of his story. The losses that had driven him into isolation, the mistakes that had cost him friendships and trust. Through these stories, Tommy understood the price of secrets and the burden of keeping them. Yet Jed's willingness to share his knowledge was a gift that transcended fear and suspicion. Word of the old cowboy's secret spread slowly at first, a whisper carried on the wind to the nearby town. Curious eyes and envious hearts soon turned toward the remote ranch, their owners eager to uncover the source of Jed's quiet fortune. Some came with offers of friendship, others with threats and schemes. Tommy felt the weight of this growing attention, the tension that thickened the air like a brewing storm. Despite the dangers, Tommy remained steadfast, driven by the lessons Jed had imparted and the fragile hope that had taken root in his heart. The boy who had wandered into the wilderness, hungry and alone, was beginning to find strength in the knowledge passed down to him, a secret that could change everything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky burned with the last light of day, Jed and Tommy sat side by side on the porch, the gold nuggets resting quietly between them. Jed's voice was soft but firm. "You've got a long road ahead, son, but with patience and grit, those hills will give up their secrets. Just remember, some secrets are worth more than gold." Tommy nodded, understanding the unspoken truth beneath the words. This was not just about wealth. It was about trust, survival, and the bond between two souls shaped by hardship and hope. As night embraced the land, the two figures sat silently, the flicker of the campfire a small beacon against the vast wilderness, a beginning born from shared secrets and quiet determination. The dawn broke with a faint blush across the sky, casting long shadows over the rugged hills surrounding Jed's ranch. Tommy rose early, the cold morning air biting at his skin as he stepped outside, the weight of the old cowboy's teachings lingering in his mind like a steady drumbeat. Today, the wilderness awaited him, not as a cruel adversary, but as a puzzle to be unraveled, a secret to be coaxed from the earth's hidden depths. Jed stood nearby watching quietly as Tommy gathered his tools, a battered pan, a small pickaxe, and a leather pouch for collecting samples. The old man's eyes held a mixture of expectation and skepticism. "Remember," Jed said gruffly, "it ain't just luck that finds gold. You gotta learn to listen to the hills, look for the signs, the quartz veins, the color of the soil, the way the water flows. They all tell a story if you know how to read it." Tommy nodded, determination hardening his features. The first days were harsh. His attempts to find even a speck of gold were met with frustration and doubt. The hills seemed indifferent, their rocky faces unyielding to the boy's eager hands. Sweat stung his eyes under the relentless sun, and his muscles ached from the relentless labor. But with each failed pan and empty scoop of earth, Tommy's resolve grew stronger. As the weeks passed, Tommy began to recognize subtle patterns, the glint of mica sparkling like distant stars in the dirt, the faint traces of quartz embedded in fractured rock, and the way certain plants clung to the soil near mineral-rich veins. Jed's lessons unfolded in his mind like a map, guiding him through the labyrinth of the hills. Each small discovery was a victory, a thread woven into the tapestry of knowledge that would one day lead to the treasure he sought. Yet, The wilderness was only one part of the challenge. Word of Jed's secret began to ripple through the nearby town, carried on the whispers of curious neighbors and envious prospectors. At the local tavern, voices muttered over whiskey glasses, speculation and suspicion thick in the smoky air. "Old Jed's got gold in them hills," one grizzled miner claimed, eyes narrowing. "And that boy, Tommy, he's learning the secret. Could be trouble." The townsfolk's warnings reached Tommy in uneasy fragments. Some cautioned him to stay away from the old man, painting Jed as a recluse guarding his fortune with a jealous heart. Others warned that trusting the cowboy might lead only to betrayal, or worse. The boy felt the weight of their skepticism like a shadow stretching over his newfound hope. One afternoon, as he returned to the ranch with a small pan of dirt, a local farmer intercepted him by the dusty road. "You best be careful, lad," the man said, voice low and wary. "There's talk in town. Folks don't take kindly to secrets they can't get their hands on. You're messing with forces bigger than you know." Tommy's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he replied steadily. "I'm just trying to learn." The farmer shrugged, a grim smile touching his lips. "Learning's a dangerous game round here. Keep your wits about you." Back at the ranch, Jed sensed the growing tension. The old cowboy's weathered face hardened as he paced the porch, eyes scanning the horizon, as if expecting enemies to emerge from the dust. "These hills don't just test your grit," he muttered. "They test your trust. And out here, trust's as rare as gold." Tommy watched Jed carefully, understanding that their fragile bond was under threat, not just from the wilderness, but from the outside world, eager to claim what Jed had protected for so long. The boy's heart ached with the weight of responsibility, knowing that every step he took toward the secret also drew unwanted eyes and possible danger. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with fiery reds, a group of townsfolk arrived at the ranch's gate. Their faces bore the weariness of long days and the hunger of greed. "We hear you've been teaching that boy the way to find gold," one of them said, voice rough and demanding. "We want in. It's only fair." Jed's eyes narrowed, the flicker of the campfire reflecting in their steely depths. "This secret ain't for the taking," he said firmly. "It's earned with sweat and patience, not grabbed with threats and greed." The townsfolk exchanged uneasy glances but pressed their case, their voices rising with frustration and suspicion. Tommy felt the tension coil tight around his chest, the fragile trust between him and Jed tested by the encroaching storm of envy and doubt. After the visitors left, Jed turned to Tommy, his voice low and serious. "You gotta be ready, boy. The world out there don't take kindly to secrets kept from them. Folks will come sniffing, and not all of them will be friends." Tommy swallowed hard, the weight of those words sinking deep. The wilderness was no longer the only challenge. The human heart, jealous, fearful, and hungry, was an obstacle just as daunting. Days later, Tommy returned to the hills with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to prove himself worthy of Jed's trust. Each swing of his pickaxe was measured, each pan of dirt carefully examined. The hills whispered their secrets slowly, but the boy's patience grew with every lesson learned. Yet the pressure from town lingered, a shadow at the edge of his thoughts. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and strangers' eyes lingered too long when he passed on the main street. Tommy felt the fragile line between trust and suspicion stretch thinner with each passing day. One afternoon, as he worked beside a creek bed, a townsperson approached cautiously. "I hear you're learning the old man's secret," the stranger said, voice low. "Careful who you trust. It ain't just the hills that'll test you." Tommy met the man's gaze steadily. "I'm here to learn, not to fight. The stranger nodded slowly, respect flickering across his features. Then you best be ready. The secret's worth more than gold, and some will kill to get it. Tommy watched the man walk away, the warnings settling like dust in the air. The wilderness, the town, the secret. They were all pieces of a puzzle he was only beginning to understand. But with Jed's guidance and his own growing resolve, Tommy was ready to face the trials ahead. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the hills, Tommy paused to look back toward the ranch. Jed's silhouette stood firm against the fading light, a silent sentinel guarding not just gold, but a legacy of trust and survival. The boy's journey was only beginning, and the path ahead was as uncertain as it was promising. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the rugged hills as Tommy made his way back to the ranch, the weight of the day's efforts pressing heavily on his shoulders. The dirt trail beneath his boots was dry and cracked, mirroring the unease settling deep within him. The secret Jed had entrusted him with was no longer just a promise of fortune. It had become a burden, one that drew watchful eyes and whispered threats from those who coveted the hidden treasure. As Tommy rounded a bend near the creek, a figure stepped from the shadows, a man with a weathered face and eyes that glittered with a mix of cunning and malice. The stranger's presence was sudden and unwelcome, a stark reminder that the quiet hills were no sanctuary from the greed festering beyond their borders. "You've been panning for gold, boy," the man said, voice low and threatening. "Word gets around fast, and folks like me don't take kindly to secrets kept from us." Tommy's heart pounded, but he squared his shoulders, meeting the man's gaze with a steady resolve. "I'm just learning. The old man's teaching me." The man's lips curled into a sneer. "Jed's secret won't stay hidden for long if you're as clumsy as you look. I'm here to make sure it doesn't." Before Tommy could react, the stranger stepped closer, the threat unmistakable. The boy's mind raced. Should he run, fight, or try to talk his way out? But his years of watching Jed had taught him that courage was more than brute force. It was knowing when to stand firm and when to hold back. "I'm not here to start trouble," Tommy said carefully, "but I won't let you steal what doesn't belong to you." The man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hills. "We'll see about that, boy." Behind the tense exchange, a flicker of movement caught Tommy's eye, another figure lurking among the rocks, watching and waiting. The stranger wasn't alone. The realization sent a cold shiver down Tommy's spine. This was no chance encounter. It was a calculated move to intimidate and expose Jed's secret. Back at the ranch, Jed sensed the dangers closing in. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the horizon as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. "You've stirred the hornet's nest, Tommy," he said quietly. "Now we gotta be ready for what comes next." The days that followed were a crucible of tension. Tommy found himself shadowed by unknown faces in town, their whispers thick with suspicion and menace. The rival prospector's threats grew bolder, his presence a dark cloud over the boy's every step. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, Tommy's determination hardened. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky burned with hues of crimson and gold, Tommy stood at the edge of the creek, panning for gold as Jed had taught him. The water rushed around his fingers, cold and relentless, mirroring the turmoil within. Suddenly a glint caught his eye, a fleck of gold, small but unmistakable, shining beneath the swirling water. Tommy's breath caught. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the proof that Jed's secret was real and within his grasp. But the victory was tempered by the knowledge that others were closing in, ready to snatch it away. As twilight deepened, the rival prospector appeared again, this time with a small group of men. Their faces were hard, eyes filled with greed and suspicion. "Hand over the secret, boy," the leader demanded, "or we'll take it by force." Tommy's grip tightened on his pan. "I'm not giving it up," The standoff was tense, the air thick with the promise of violence, but Jed stepped forward, his presence commanding and steady. "There's no need for bloodshed," he said calmly. "This secret's earned, not stolen." The rivals' eyes flicked between Jed and Tommy, weighing the risk. But the old cowboy's calm confidence was a shield neither had expected. "If you want the secret, you'll have to prove you're worthy," Jed continued, "not with guns or threats, but with grit and respect." The challenge hung in the air, a test of character rather than strength. The rivals' men murmured among themselves, their hostility wavering in the face of Jed's unwavering stance. In the days that followed, Tommy faced trials not just from the land, but from the shadows cast by those who coveted the gold. The wilderness tested his courage, the rivals' aggression tested his resolve, and the weight of the secret tested his very soul. Through it all, Jed's lessons echoed in his mind: patience, wisdom, and the quiet strength to stand firm when the world demanded surrender. Tommy was no longer just a boy seeking fortune. He was a guardian of a legacy forged in sweat and trust, ready to face whatever storms lay ahead. The morning sun spilled gold across the hills, casting a warm glow over the rugged landscape as Tommy set out once more with Jed's teachings firmly etched in his mind. The creek's water whispered secrets as it wound through the rocks, and Tommy's eyes scanned every curve, every shimmer, searching for the elusive promise hidden beneath the earth's rough skin. Today, the wilderness felt different, charged with possibility and tension, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Hours passed with nothing more than dirt and stones in his pan, but Tommy's resolve did not waver. Then, just as the sun reached its zenith, a sudden sparkle caught his eye. A cluster of golden flecks nestled beneath a thin layer of river silt. His heart thundered in his chest as he carefully lifted the pan to examine the treasure. The gold was real, rich and warm, a vein of promise coursing through the creek bed. At that moment, footsteps echoed behind him, slow and deliberate. Tommy turned to find the rival prospector approaching. His eyes narrowed and lips curled in a bitter smile. The man's face was weathered and hard, but today there was a flicker of something else. Respect, begrudging, and reluctant. "You found it," the prospector said, voice low and grudging. "Didn't think you had it in you, boy." Tommy met the man's gaze steadily. "Jed taught me well. It ain't just luck. It's knowing where to look and having the patience to keep looking." The prospector studied Tommy for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Maybe you're different. Maybe you deserve this secret." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn knife, offering it to Tommy. "Here, take it. It's a token, a sign that you've earned your place." Tommy hesitated, then accepted the knife, feeling the weight of its blade and the significance behind the gesture. This was more than a tool. It was a silent truce, a passing of respect between rival souls bound by the same hunger for survival. With Jed's guidance, Tommy began to use wisdom and strategy rather than force. He mapped the hills with careful precision, noting the patterns of erosion and the subtle shifts in soil color. He moved quietly, avoiding unnecessary conflict and focusing on the delicate dance between man and land. Each day brought new discoveries and strengthened his claim, not just to gold, but to the legacy Jed had entrusted to him. The rival prospector, once a looming threat, became an unexpected ally in the treacherous hills. They shared stories by campfires, exchanged tips, and tested each other's knowledge. The tension that had once crackled like wildfire between them cooled into a cautious camaraderie forged in the heat of shared struggle. One evening, as the sky bled into shades of purple and rose, Jed joined them by the fire. His eyes gleamed with a quiet pride as he watched Tommy and the prospector discussing the land with a newfound respect. "You've come a long way, boy," Jed said softly. Not just finding gold, but earning trust. Tommy smiled, the weight of the journey lifting just enough to let hope seep in. It ain't just about the gold anymore. It's about what we do with it, and who we become in the process. The victory marked a turning point. Tommy was no longer the desperate boy who had wandered into the wilderness. He was a man shaped by patience, wisdom, and courage. The hills had revealed their secrets, but more importantly, the trials had revealed the strength within him. As the days grew longer and the gold veins richer, Tommy and Jed forged a bond deeper than teacher and pupil. Together, they guarded the secret with quiet vigilance, knowing that the true treasure was not just the gold beneath their feet, but the trust and integrity that had been earned through hardship. The rival prospector, once a shadow of menace, became a symbol of the transformation that had taken root in the hills, a reminder that even in a world driven by greed and fear, respect and honor could forge unlikely alliances. Under the vast sky, with the hills stretching endlessly around them, Tommy stood tall, the leather knife sheath at his side, a testament to the journey he had undertaken. The secret was safe, the gold was real, and the future was his to shape, not with violence or greed, but with the quiet strength of a man who had earned his place through patience and perseverance. Tommy rode into town just as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, casting long shadows over the dusty main street. His horse's hooves stirred the dry earth, the steady rhythm echoing through the quiet evening. In his saddlebag was the proof of his success, a small pouch filled with gold nuggets, their warm glow catching the last light of day. But unlike the prospectors and fortune seekers who had come before him, Tommy bore no swagger, no boastful pride. Instead, there was a quiet humility in his gaze, a reflection of the journey that had led him here. The townsfolk watched as the boy who had once been little more than a shadow on the outskirts returned with the unmistakable mark of fortune. Whispers rippled through the crowd, curiosity mingling with skepticism. Some eyed him with envy, others with doubt, unsure whether the newcomer's quiet confidence could withstand the harsh scrutiny of the town's judgment. Tommy dismounted and made his way to the general store, where familiar faces greeted him with cautious smiles. The storekeeper, a grizzled man named Amos, examined the gold nuggets with a raised eyebrow. "Where'd you find these, son?" Tommy met Amos's gaze steadily. "In the hills, like Jed showed me. It took time, but the secret's real." Amos nodded slowly, the skepticism in his eyes giving way to respect. "Well, I'll be damned. Maybe there's more to that old cowboy than we thought." Word spread quickly, and soon Tommy found himself the subject of both admiration and suspicion. But instead of flaunting his newfound wealth, he chose a different path, one shaped by the values Jed had instilled in him. He used the gold not to build walls around himself, but to open doors for others struggling in the same hard town. Tommy paid off debts for struggling farmers, helped repair the broken roofs of dilapidated homes, and invested in the local schoolhouse to give children a chance at a better future. His generosity was quiet but profound, a steady current beneath the surface of a town still learning to trust. At the same time, the townsfolk who had once doubted him began to see a different side of Tommy, a young man shaped not just by fortune, but by integrity and kindness. Old rivalries softened, and new alliances formed as the community rallied around a shared hope born from Tommy's example. Jed, watching from the edge of town, felt a rare peace settle over him. The old cowboy's eyes, usually guarded and wary, now gleamed with quiet pride. He had passed on more than a secret to Tommy. He had passed on a legacy of trust and perseverance. One afternoon, Jed approached Tommy as he worked alongside townsfolk to repair a broken fence. "You've done good, son," Jed said gruffly, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Not just with the gold, but with how you treat folks. That's the real treasure." Tommy paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I learned from the best," he replied softly. "It's not just what you have, but what you do with it." Together they stood on the porch of the general store, watching the town bustle with new life and quiet hope. The secret of the hills had brought more than gold. It had brought a chance for renewal, for community, and for a future built on more than just wealth. As days turned into months, Tommy's reputation grew, not as a wealthy man, but as a leader and friend. His story became one told around campfires and in the quiet corners of the tavern, a tale of perseverance, trust, and the power of kindness. Jed's teachings lived on through Tommy's actions, a living testament to the transformative power of shared wisdom and generosity. The boy who had once wandered the wilderness, hungry and alone, was now a beacon of hope, guiding others from poverty to possibility. In the heart of the town, surrounded by those he had helped rise, Tommy understood that the true value of the secret was not the gold beneath the hills, but the strength it had given him to build something lasting and real. Years had passed since Tommy first stepped into the hills with a worn pan and a heart full of hope. The town had transformed alongside him, its dusty streets now lined with sturdy homes and bustling shops, a testament to the quiet revolution sparked by a boy who had once known only hunger and hardship. Tommy stood on the porch of his own modest home, watching children play in the warm afternoon light, their laughter a balm to the memories of struggle that still lingered in the corners of his mind. The gold he had found was no longer the measure of his worth. Instead, it was the lives he had touched, the farmers who now tilled richer soil, the families who shared meals instead of empty plates, and the young ones who dreamed beyond the horizon. Tommy's wealth was woven into the fabric of the community, a legacy built on generosity and trust rather than greed. Each year, as the seasons turned, a familiar figure would arrive from the hills, Jed, the old cowboy whose secret had changed both their lives. Though age had slowed him, his eyes still held the sharpness of a man who had seen the land's harsh truths and quiet beauties. The two men would sit by the fire, sharing stories and reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Jed's visits were a reminder that the true treasure was not the gold beneath the earth, but the bonds forged through hardship and kindness. "You did good, Tommy," Jed would say, voice rough but warm. "You took what I gave you and made it something more. That's the kind of gold that lasts." Tommy would nod, the weight of those words settling deep within him. He had learned that riches could build walls or bridges, and he had chosen the latter. The town thrived not because of the gold, but because of the spirit of giving it had inspired. Together, Tommy and Jed watched as the community grew stronger, a living testament to the power of shared wisdom and perseverance. Their story became legend, a tale told around campfires and in quiet homes, reminding all who heard it that true wealth was measured not in nuggets of gold, but in the courage to trust, the strength to endure, and the grace to help others rise. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the land, Tommy felt a deep peace settle within him. The secret of the hills had become more than a fortune. It had become a legacy of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of kindness. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.